Hello everybody and welcome back to the Golang tutorial. So in this video we're going to be talking about arithmetic operators and how you can perform basic mathematical operations in Golang. Now this is pretty straightforward, but there's a few nuances here that I want to show you because these are things you will often run into or problems you will often run into. So let's go ahead and get started. Now the basic operators that we have in Golang for actually performing arithmetic is plus, minus, we have slash, we have multiplication, then we have mod, which is the percent sign. So these are what the 5 kind of standard arithmetic operators are. Of course, we have a set of brackets that we can use just like we would, in regular math. So we can put expressions inside of the brackets and then other operators outside of them. But that's the basics for this. Now, the important thing in Golang is that whenever we use these operators, so plus, minus, division, multiplication, I assume you all know how those work. The types that we have, so the operands on the left and right side of that operator need to be the same type. So in this case, since num1 and num2 are both ints, we can perform these different operators on them. So I can do num1 plus num2 and say num1 minus num2, num1 divided by num2. There'll be no issue in doing that because these are the same type. Now what happens though in an issue that occurs is if this becomes all of a sudden, say like a float 64, even if this value is still, an integer value like this, right? So let's actually do this. You're going to notice that we get the little squiggly line here and it says invalid operation, mismatch types, float 64 and int. So even if the values seem like they would make sense to perform the operation on, so like, 8.5 over 4, it doesn't work like that. They need to be the same types. So I'm going to show you really quickly how if you have, say, a float like this and an int like this, you can still perform these mathematical operations. Now, ideally, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to convert any ints you have into floats and then do those floating point arithmetic. So I can actually convert this num2 to a floating point number simply by typing float 64 like that, and then putting brackets around num2. So now what this actually does is converts num2 to the value of float 64. So pretty much whenever we're working with numeric types, so floats and ints, those are kind of the basics, we can convert between them by just using something like this. So like int, we put some float value in here, and what this will actually do is just make this value become 6. It will round it down and just round off the decimal point. Well, I guess it's not really rounding, it's just stripping off the decimal point and making it whatever the whole number equivalent is to this. So that's how you can do basic conversions. You can use something like int 32, int 8, uint 8 if you wanted to do that between all these numeric types and convert between them. So just keep that in mind. You really need to make sure that the types that you're doing this arithmetic on are the same. And yeah, that is pretty much the answer. So let me show you actually what happens. Let me change this back to int. So let's make this int. Let's just go and get rid of this float here. And let's do num1. Let me make this 9 and let's divide by 4. Now what I want to show you is what actually happens when I do 9 divided by 4 and I print out the answer here. So let me look at this. I'm going to have to actually get this terminal back up. So let's go to terminal, cmd go, run tutorial.go. Let's see what we get. We get 2. So notice that 9 divided by 4, the answer is actually not 2. It's 2 point something, right? 2.25 or whatever that value actually is. That's the answer, but we're just getting 2. The reason for that is whatever type these two values are, so these two operands on the left and right side, that's what this answer is going to be. So what the evaluation of this expression, if they're both ints, the answer will be an int, which means that this will just give you the integer representation of whatever that actually was, right? Because we're not dealing with any floating point numbers. Now, if we wanted a floating point result, we would have to change these values to float. So if I change this to float 32 and float 32, and now I actually go ahead and run this, you can see that we get, oops, I need to change this to %g, sorry, so the output's correct, but let's have a look at this. We get the value of 2.25. So that is how you deal with floating points and integers. The biggest issue any of you are probably going to have is that conversion between floats and ints and dealing with all those things. So just keep in mind that, they need to be the same. Now, of course, in Go, just like pretty much all other programming languages, we do follow BEDMAS to some extent. So BEDMAS is an acronym. I'm going to try to type it in here. Let's see. So B without the autocomplete, just auto completing my lines. Yeah. Okay, so BEDMAS, this is the acronym. So this stands for brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. So this is the basic order of operations in mathematics. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that acronym before, but essentially what that means is I can do something like this. Like I can put brackets around here, I can add that 5, and obviously we'll make sure we do the division first, which would have happened anyways, and then add the 5 to that. So just keep that in mind. Anything that you know from basic math pretty well holds here in Go. There's a few nuances, but that's about it. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what's called the mod operator. So let me change these back to int. My caps locks can be deactivated, and I'll show you what mod does. So I'm actually just going to print out the value of num1 mod num2. Now what mod does is give you the remainder after division. So if you think back to kind of elementary school math, before you were dealing with fractions and all of that, what you would do when you do division is you would say like 9 divided by 4 is 2 remainder 1. Because 4 goes into 9 2 times, and then you can't put another 4 in, but there's 1 left over. So whatever that leftover is, so the remainder, is what the modulus will actually give us. So when we do 9 mod 4, that will give us the value of 1. So let me actually go down here and run this, and we'll have a look. And I always forget to do this. I gotta change this back to D here. Just show it so it shows it properly. Okay, so we get 1, right? So that's the remainder. Now if I change this to 10, then the mod value that we're gonna get will be, what is it? 2, right? Now, the only cases I want to show you that you probably wouldn't necessarily guess is if I do something like 0 mod 4. I mean, what do you think this one's going to be? Take a guess. Let's see. The mod of that is 0. Now, this is one that you need to watch out for, is when you do something like this. So if you mod with 0 as, I guess, the, what do you call that? The divisor or something, or whatever that is. If num2 is 0, so you're modding by 0, you're going to run into an issue. And I'll actually show you the error that you're going to have. It's called a division by 0 issue. So or error, whatever that is. So if we look here, you can see that what happens is when we go run tutorial.go, we have a panic. This is Golang's kind of idea of an exception or an error. It's just a panic. That's what they call it. So here we can see a runtime error, integer divide by 0. So that's not allowed. You cannot divide by 0, just like in your calculator. That's going to return an error. But just notice that this actually happened at runtime, which meant like my code was able to compile. I was able to execute this fine and actually run the code, but what happened was when it had that division by 0, this is known as a runtime error, then it crashed. So beforehand, Go didn't notice anything was wrong because the division by 0 didn't happen yet, but once it occurred, then that happened. Whereas if I did something like, 3.2 here, and I save this, we'll get a little squiggly line popping up that tells us, this isn't okay, you can't do this, right? And if we try to run the code, actually, I don't know if this one will run or not, but let's see here. It shouldn't actually even let us get into, yeah, so here it says, so constants 3.2 truncated integers. So this means we actually weren't even able to run and execute the code. It told us before we could do that, hey, there's a problem, you can't run the code. So that's just something to keep in mind. We'll talk more about errors and panics later on. Okay, but that's how mod works. That's how division, addition, subtraction works. The last thing I'll say is that if you want to do math like exponents, for example, or you want to do like arctangents or cosine, there is a package called the math package. If you import it up here just under FMT, then what you can do is use math dot, I think like for square root, for example, ABS. There's a bunch of ones popping up here, exponent, exponent 2, float 64. There's all these different functions that you can use. There's actually a mod function here. There's logarithms, like anything you would need will be inside this math package. So if you need a specific mathematical function that's not in here, or you need a constant like pi or something, you can get it from that math package. But with that being said, I think that's pretty much it for arithmetic. I mean, it's pretty basic. Like you can add those brackets, order of operations holds, plus, minus, division, multiplication, exponents, mod, all of that. If you understand that, you're good to go. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next Golang tutorial.